Hello and welcome to yesterday's Airlines for another detailed 400 scale model review. And in this review we're obviously going to be looking at the South African Airways Boeing 747-200 ZS SAN by Aeroclassics. Now last month was a really bumper month for Aeroclassics releases, and not only did we have the return of the 727-100, we had some great A300s, but we also had a selection of 747 classics, the first time that Aeroclassics has released any 747s for well over a decade. And yeah, admittedly they weren't packaged as Aeroclassics, but everyone surely knows when it's an Aeroclassics model nowadays, because it doesn't have any aerials on it. So even though I think the box for this one said Blue Box or Big Bird or Your Craftsman or whatever it said, it's clearly an Aeroclassics model. Anyway, we don't get a large number of 747 classics anymore, and that's a real shame. Lots of them are incredibly hard to find. Hopefully this will be the beginning of a renaissance for the 747. Obviously there's a suggestion that NG models will also be making a mold. Be interesting to see whether that pans out. But in this review we're going to be focusing on this Aeroclassics 747 and making a bit of a comparison of this with older Aeroclassics molds, also the Gemini and the Dragonwings molds. So let's begin. As always, my model reviews are split into three sections. Firstly, we look at the mold itself. Secondly, we look at the livery application. And lastly, we look at printing and quality control. Each of these three areas can get a maximum score of 10 for a combined maximum score of 30. So as always, we'll start by looking at the mold for this 747. Now this is far from a new mold. This mold is actually incredibly old and dates, or at least parts of it anyway, date way back to around the year 2000, 2001. It's a mold which was originally created for Big Bird and then used also by Aeroclassics. It has passed through multiple companies since that time, through the ownership of Witty Wings, into the hands of JC Wings and Big Bird Mark III, and now it seems Aeroclassics have made some kind of deal with JC where they at least get to use it occasionally. It's not exactly the original mold, and we'll look at that in detail, but it's broadly the same. And because it's an older mold, obviously that means that you don't get some of the more modern aspects that you get or would get with a new mold. Firstly, as you can see, it's a cradle mount mold, so you've got the seam line running here. It's actually a pretty nice seam, and it's quite tightly connected to the fuselage. It doesn't quite follow the correct path if this was just following the fairing, but it's not far away. It's not a major distraction on the model, in my opinion. Secondly, we get the not completely modern pylon wing join here, which is a little bit square and not quite as nice. I mean, so it's not perfect, but again, if you're looking at this, as a 747, it obviously looks very nice. It's got a very impressive profile around the nose and the cockpit and the hump. It's got actually some of the best early landing gear of any 400 scale models. These gears don't roll because they haven't bothered changing that, and that's fine by me because frankly, I like them the way they are. You move into the underside. As with most 747 molds, the main bogies here actually do move a little bit. The other ones do not, and are static. It's got a really nice look to it, the 747. The back end is very good again. There's no real issues with the shape or form. It's very tightly fitted. It's actually a really good 747 mold. Now, the one difference between this mold and the original Aeroclassics Big Bird mold are the wingtip aerials. And as you can see here, they are a little bit thick. Some people have called them broom handle aerials, which I think is a little bit harsh, frankly. But they are certainly thicker than on a real 747. And if we look at the older version of this mold, as shown by this Big Bird TWA 747 here, then you can see that the wingtip aerials are substantially thinner, substantially pointier, and a better shape overall. So, yeah, this is a better version of the mold, the older version, but also the big problem that you get with these wingtip aerials and 747s in this scale is that they snap off incredibly easily. And I've, got a few models that are my own, and also a couple I've picked up secondhand, which have got snapped off bent aerials on the wingtips. It's a real pain. I've seen somebody on YouTube on Facebook has done a really good job of replacing these with needles, actually, and they look really good. But at the same time, it's like a lot of work. So actually, I don't mind the fact that they're a little bit thicker on this version, and there have been many versions of this Big Bird mold, so it's unclear, exactly what version this is. But I don't mind slightly larger wingtip aerials because it means they're not going to snap off as much, and they still look pretty good. So, this is actually a really nice 747. Yeah, it's a slightly older mold. It doesn't bother me that much. It looks pretty good. Yeah, it's got a seam. Yeah, the engine pylon joint isn't 100%, what you'd expect in a 2020 model, but it is a great mold. And if we compare it to some of the other 747 molds that I have, and first off, we've got the Dragon Wings mold, which is actually a really nice mold as well. It's got a very good shape. It's got the same things that Dragon always has. The tail's not very well connected. The undercarriage is simplistic, but it's not bad. Actually, the aerials on the wingtips are actually very short on this mold too. It's got better pylon engine join. But yeah, it's a good mold as well. A good classic Dragon mold. Surely everyone has got some Dragon 747s. It's one of the best, if not the best, mold that Dragon ever made. It's not quite as good as this AC mold, I don't think, but it is seamless, so maybe, it really depends what you prefer. If the seam and the engine join bothers you, then you're probably going for the Dragon. And it's a good mold. In the Gemini arena, then we've got one of the updated versions of the Gemini mold here. This one doesn't have aerials. I think some of the later ones, so I can't remember. They don't make many 747s, frankly. But it's the classic mold. It's good. They've upgraded it with rolling gears, which are actually not bad. The undercarriage is super chunky in a good way. It's actually almost impossible to break, which is nice. Again, the aerials are a little bit short on the wing there, but they are thinner. The reality is, if you're going to have them thin, then they've got to be short. If you're going to have them slightly chunkier, they can be a more realistic length, unless you're going to risk breakages. It's a good mold, and they've obviously got rid of this tail seam that the early releases had. It's not quite as good, again, as, in my opinion, shape-wise, as the Big Bird mold. And again, it's got the same cradle mount issues, and it's got actually a worse engine pylon wing join here than the Big Bird. So this one's, again, it's a good mold, but it's not quite as nice. And really, they're the only 747 contenders that are commonly in the market. There is a seamless version of this mold, which I actually do have somewhere in the collection, which was used by Willy Wings, which is probably the ultimate 747-200, but it wasn't used very much. And there's obviously a selection of very poor Phoenix 747-200s around, using them. I think it's 2007 mold, which is a complete dog's breakfast and should be avoided at all costs. So, in terms of 747s, this is a great classic mold. It's got a couple of issues, as a lot of older molds do, in terms of the way it's been built. The cradle mount, the engine pylon join. Yeah, it doesn't have rolling gear. Boo-hoo. And, overall, I think it's a great mold. And historically, when I've reviewed these 747s, I've given them 8s or 9s. Nowadays, I think it's probably an 8, given the improved technology of modern mold construction. So I think this one's, getting an 8 for the mold. It's a good 747, close to great. In terms of delivery, obviously this aircraft sports the post-apartheid 1990s South African scheme, which is based on the new South African flag. Everyone really quite likes this Springbok scheme, but obviously it's got associations with a regime which is not particularly pleasant. So it doesn't surprise me too much that South Africa changed their livery when the politics changed. Slightly disappointing, perhaps they went for a Euro white scheme, but it is possibly one of the nicest Euro white schemes that has ever been made. And Aeroclassics here has actually done a really nice job on this. Even though it's a simple scheme, it has actually got quite a lot of nuance to it. And if we try and get a close-up of the tail, you'll see that Aeroclassics has nicely got these kind of sparkly bronzed areas at the rear of the that triangle there, and also in the sun rising here. It actually gives a really nice effect and actually matches quite closely to the real thing. The other colours and the placement of the elements is great as well. So the tail is actually a really, really nicely done piece on the model better than Aeroclassics often manage, to be honest. Moving forward, we've got the large South African titles. Again, AC sometimes isn't great with fonts. In this case, I've had a look at the photos. It looks really good, so no problems there. We've got the IATA symbol down here, and we've got the aircraft name, Le Bombo, plus the registration on the nose gear and the rear fuselage. So it's a simple scheme. It's hard to muck up a Euro white scheme too badly, and that's one of the reasons I think that AC chose several Euro white 747s for their early models. For these 747s is just so the factory could get used to the type again, get used to printing on them and do some slightly simpler schemes. But nonetheless, they've done a really nice job here. I can't really fault the livery application on this South African at all. It's very good. So that's a 10 out of 10, I think, on the livery for me for this 747. Really rather nice. So it's on to the stand for the last portion of the video, looking at the quality control. I mean, as you see, I've been moving this model around. It's a good, solid, older mold. There have been no construction problems here. It's got really nicely fitted fuselage elements, no major gaps. The engines are nicely attached. The undercarriage is all good. So it's got no problems in terms of the build quality, quite obviously. Obviously, one of the things that you don't get with Aeroclassics is ultra fine printing standards. You can see that the engines, don't really have any panels on. There's no nose cone lines, but at the same time, it model still reflects, very nicely what it's trying to achieve here, and what is printed very well. So, yeah, I mean, I could probably knock off a point for not having some ultra kind of level of JC Wings NG printing detail. To be honest, I don't really miss it too much. It looks really good. I'm minded not to knock anything off, and AC have at least gone to the effort of making sure that the engine inners are not silver. They are quite a nice dark titanium, kind of dark grey, but not completely black either. This is a really nice model. It presents really nicely, and again, I'm going to give it full marks in terms of the construction and the printing here, because there's nothing really that I can say and pick out which is especially wrong with it. The printing is good, and it's really well put together. So yeah, 10 out of 10 again in that space. The summary, as you can tell, I actually really like this model. I really like the fact that AC have been good enough to get access to the mold from JC Wings, who really weren't using it with Big Bird Mark III. And, these are really nice 747s, which, even though they're lacking some of the very most modern aspects like aerials, obviously, then it doesn't really impact the quality of the model itself too much. I should also say, that this aircraft itself is relatively special in terms of its history. It was the first 747 delivered to South African in 1971. It served all the way through till March 2004 and has been donated to the South African Airways Museum. So it's something you can actually go and visit. Presumably, even though SAA is now gone, the museum continues. I'm not really sure. But nonetheless, it's an important aircraft in the history of South Africa. It's a really nicely produced model. Aeroclassics has done a really bang-up job with this, and I've got 3 of the 5 747s they released last month, and I'm really happy with them. I don't see them as stopgaps until NG go about producing models. I think these are really nice in their own right, so well worth adding to your collection if you can find them. And to be honest, they've sold out very quickly, and they're super difficult to get hold of already. So 747s always seem to sell well, and these are really nice examples, the sort of thing which 400 scale has really been missing for way too long. So, I highly recommend them. Keep an eye out for further blue box or whatever they're called 747s in the next few months. I get the feeling and there will be some more of these, and they're really nice. So yeah, well done AC on this one. This one gets a 28 out of 30. It's got 8 for the mold and 10 for the other 2 categories. It's a really good model. So see if you can find one, add it to your African collection. Obviously, keep an eye out for the channel and like this video if you indeed did enjoy it. Please also check out the website. There's tons more information on models like this. There's loads of information about the history of 400 scale and lots of other cool stuff. And I post, pretty regularly, sorry. So, thanks very much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Cheers.